What would you do if the man you trusted with your whole life turned out to be someone you didn't really know? Have you ever come home early, thinking you were doing something sweet, only to wish you hadn't walked through that door? Ever felt your chest go tight over something small, like a closed door that shouldn't be closed? Zaira Clay did, and that door changed her entire life. This isn't just a story about secrets. It's about how love survives them. It's about truth, and whether it's strong enough to rebuild what lies shatter. Stay with us. You're about to hear what happened the day Zaira came home. One day too early. The jet touched down before sunrise. The sky over Napa was still grey, and the fog rolled in low over the vineyard hills. Zaira's suitcase clicked softly behind her as the town car curved through the private gates of the Roth estate. She didn't call ahead. She thought she'd surprise him. That was the kind of wife she was. The kind who remembered anniversaries, who double-checked Kaylin's calendar even when he forgot to update it, who left handwritten notes by the coffee pot, who smiled through long silences because she believed some men just didn't speak love. They showed it. Zaira Clay believed in structure. She grew up that way, in a sleepy Oregon town where people respected routine. Her father was a history teacher. Her mother taught third grade. Everything had a place. Trust wasn't questioned because there was never a reason to. Even when she married a billionaire, she didn't lose that mindset. Kaylin Roth had everything: power, reputation, money, discipline. He was quiet but brilliant. When he stood on a stage, people listened. When he walked into a room, heads turned. And yet, he chose her. Not for the spotlight, not for status, because she challenged him. They met during a university tech seminar in San Francisco. Kaylin was the keynote speaker. Zaira was still finishing her master's in design and sustainability. He spoke about algorithms. She raised her hand and asked why none of them considered the human element. He blinked, then smiled. That was how it began. A year later, they were married. Not in some lavish press-filled affair, but a private ceremony in a vineyard chapel surrounded by cypress trees and late summer fog. Their home wasn't a high-rise. It was a quiet estate built into the hills where Kaylin could work in peace and she could design interiors without interruption. For a while, it was perfect, but something changed. It started small. Locked doors, unanswered calls, late nights he didn't explain. A wing of the house, always said to be under renovation, remained sealed no matter how many months passed. Zaira never pushed. She trusted structure, boundaries, but something in her had started to itch. This week, she had flown to Vermont to visit her sister for a long overdue girls' trip. The plan was to return Thursday, but late Tuesday night, her assistant texted. A project deadline had been moved up. She had to be in San Francisco early Wednesday for a presentation. She didn't tell Kaylin. No time. Just booked a red-eye and slept in airport silence. Now, standing at the edge of their grand entryway, Zaira felt something off. Lights were on, not the motion ones, not the kind set by automation, but warm, yellow hallway lights, the kind only turned on manually. She pulled off her coat slowly. No staff greeted her. They never arrived before 8. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:12 a.m. Then she heard it. A voice, low, female, muffled, coming from the West Wing. The one Kaylin always kept sealed off. The one that wasn't supposed to be active. Her pulse kicked up. She moved softly. The marble floors chilled her toes through her flats. Her suitcase stayed behind. Halfway down the corridor, she heard another voice, Kaylin's, but it wasn't his voice that scared her. It was how calm it sounded. Familiar. Controlled. No surprise in it. No panic. She paused outside the door. The voices were clearer now, discussing reports, adjustments, timeline, confirmation of stability, medical language. A monitor beeped softly inside. Zaira's stomach flipped. She could have walked away, could have turned around and gone back upstairs, pretended she hadn't heard anything. But she didn't. She turned the knob. The door wasn't locked. The room wasn't under renovation. It was spotless, immaculate. lined with monitors, sleek equipment, rows of climate-controlled drawers. There was a faint humming, the scent of antiseptic. Screens displayed DNA strands, charts, facial scans. And in the center stood Kaylin, wearing black, holding a tablet, calm as ever. Next to him stood a woman in a lab coat. Zaira's voice cracked before she could stop it. "Kaylin?" Both turned. The woman's eyes widened. Kaylin didn't flinch. He lowered the tablet slowly. "You're home early." Zaira stared past him at the documents on the desk. Her eyes caught a name printed in large block letters. Chiron Roth Dobb, 8/17/20XX. Relationship to subject, biological son. Zaira's world tilted. She stepped back. Kaylin said nothing. The woman cleared her throat and excused herself, slipping past Zaira like air. For a moment, they were alone in a silence that screamed. "You have a son?" she asked. His expression didn't change, but his voice did. It lowered, frayed at the edge. "Yes." Zaira's mouth went dry. "And you didn't think I should know?" "I was going to tell you." "When?" He looked at the floor. "I don't know." She took another step back. Kaylin didn't move. He didn't chase, didn't explain. He stood there like a man who had accepted the consequences already. And that, more than the secret, hurt the most. He wasn't surprised she found out. He was only surprised it took this long. Zaira didn't speak. She turned and walked out of the lab, fast, but not frantic. She didn't slam the door or scream. Her shoes made no sound on the polished floors. Her silence was louder than fury. She passed the long hallway of family photos, each one staged to perfection, press-worthy smiles, vineyard backdrops, charitable events. None of them hinted at a hidden child. None whispered of another life kept in shadows. She reached the main staircase and gripped the railing, cold under her fingertips. Her throat burned. Her heart pounded like it was trying to warn her of something she'd already seen. Kaylin followed at a distance. She heard his steps, steady, controlled, always composed. He didn't call her name, didn't dare. She entered the guest house and shut the door. Not locked, just closed. She sat on the couch, hands on her lap, breathing like she'd just run a mile. Her suitcase still stood in the foyer, untouched. It took an hour before she heard a quiet knock. Kaylin's voice, through the wood. "I won't push. I'll leave this here." Then silence. When she opened the door later, a letter sat on the floor in a navy envelope with her name written in ink. Inside, his handwriting was careful, crisp, like he'd rewritten it several times before settling on this version. "Zaira, you were never meant to find out like this. I was going to tell you, but each time I looked at you, I told myself I'd wait until after your birthday. Then, after the firm deal. Then, after our anniversary. There was always a reason to delay. Because, once I said it, everything would change. I didn't lie to hurt you. I lied because I was afraid that the man I am, the one with shadows, would lose the only light he's ever had. Cairo isn't a secret I'm proud of keeping, but he's never been a mistake. I'll explain when you're ready. Until then, I'll keep writing, even if you don't answer. Kaylin." She read it twice. No tears came, just a cold heaviness in her chest. She placed the letter on the side table and stared at the ceiling until her neck ached. By morning, another envelope waited. 3 days later. The fourth letter felt different, less structured, like he stopped trying to edit his thoughts and finally let them breathe. "I used to think I could compartmentalize everything. Business in one room, family in another, you in a locked vault where nothing bad could touch you. But Cairo doesn't belong in a box, and neither do you. I made a coward's choice when I kept him hidden from you. It wasn't protection, it was pride. He's gentle, Zaira. He doesn't speak much, but he remembers faces. He remembers kindness. If you ever want to meet him, no explanations required. Just tell me. He would like your voice. I know it." She folded the letter and placed it next to the others. Then she stood. She didn't tell Kaylin. She just showed up at the door to the West Wing at 10 a.m. The woman from before, Dr. Lin, opened it with surprise. "He's in the greenhouse," she said quietly. "That's where he likes the light." Zaira stepped inside. The lab room had been restructured into something softer. Fewer screens, more sensory tools, calming toys, a faint scent of lavender in the air. She found the greenhouse a few doors down, glass walls with vines crawling upward. Inside, Cairo sat on a padded mat, stacking wooden blocks in silent concentration. He was no older than 6, maybe 7. His hair was the color of Kaylin's. His skin a little warmer. His hands moved carefully, not clumsily. He didn't look up when she entered. Zaira watched quietly. Her breath shallow. He had a rhythm, left hand stack, right hand press. She knelt a few feet away and picked up a block. He paused, glanced, then returned to building. She gently added her block to his tower. He didn't flinch. She smiled. It was the first time she had in days. They sat in silence for over 30 minutes. No words, just presence. Cairo handed her a green block, eyes flicking upward. That was all. But it cracked something wide open. She blinked, and the tears came, not from pain, but from a release she hadn't realized she needed. Dr. Lin watched from the doorway. Kaylin stood behind her, quiet, barely breathing. He didn't speak. He didn't dare. Zaira wiped her eyes and stood. "I'm going back to the guest house," she said without looking at him. "But I'll be back tomorrow." She left before he could answer. That night, Kaylin stood alone on the balcony, the wind tugging at his sleeves. Zaira joined him. For once, she didn't feel the need to explain her presence. They stood shoulder to shoulder in silence. "I didn't marry perfection," she said at last. He closed his eyes. "I married a man I believed was strong enough to be honest." Kaylin turned to her. "I failed you." She nodded slowly. "But I see you now. And I see him. And I need time, not distance." His eyes glistened. He reached for her hand. She let him, and for the first time in days, they breathed together. Zaira didn't return to the guest house that night. She didn't sleep in the master bedroom either. She laid down in the room across the hall, the one she used to call her design studio, before everything shifted. The room smelled like old paper and lavender oil. Still hers, still quiet, still safe, but sleep never came. At 3:14 a.m., her eyes opened again. She reached for her phone, then paused. Instead of reaching out, she stood up, pulled on a sweater, and walked down to Kaylin's old office, the one he rarely used anymore. She typed the passcode, the same one he always used, 0809, their wedding date. It worked. She paused at the door. Part of her didn't want to do this, but another part whispered, "If you don't look now, you'll always wonder what else he kept from you." She opened the drawer under his desk. It was full of folders, neatly labeled. Investment records, personal legal docs, medical, private access only KR files. Her fingers hovered. She took a breath and pulled the last folder. Inside were printed emails, hospital invoices, therapy reports, and an old photo clipped to a summary report. A boy, maybe 4 or 5, holding a stick of cotton candy, face half smiling, eyes a little unfocused. Zaira stared at it. Cairo. He looked like Kaylin, too much like him to deny. She flipped through a timeline. It stretched back over 6 years. Everything matched what Kaylin said, but the truth still felt heavy. She found a document marked Confidential Settlement Agreement. It was dated 2 years before she met Kaylin. A woman named Oriel Grant. Custody dispute. Court-ordered paternity test. Subpoenas. Kaylin's lawyers. Withdrawn complaints. Gag orders. Zaira felt her stomach twist. This wasn't a messy breakup. This was war. She kept reading. Oriel had vanished, filed for a name change, moved out of state. 2 years later, she died in a car accident. No emergency contact listed. The child ended up in temporary care. That's when Kaylin reappeared in the file trail. Found the boy. Moved him into a private developmental center under an alias. hired specialists, set up funding, wiped the trace. No press, no leak, no public paper trail. He didn't just hide it from Zaira. He hid it from the world. She sat back in the leather chair and stared at the wall. It wasn't that he didn't care. He cared so much. He buried it under concrete. At breakfast, she didn't mention the files. Kaylin made coffee, not from the machine, by hand. He set a cup in front of her. No words, just a quiet offering. Zaira took it, fingers grazing his. You said you found him after she died. Yes. Why didn't you bring him home? Kaylin looked down. Because I didn't want you to see the worst part of me. Before I had a chance to prove I was better, she stared at him. You thought I couldn't handle the truth? He hesitated. No. I thought I couldn't handle losing you after you knew it. Zaira looked at her cup. I read the files, all of them. Kaylin didn't move. He looked like a man standing trial. I know everything, she added. His jaw flexed. I didn't want to drag you into that mess. I spent years building clean walls around us. You deserved that. You don't build a marriage on clean walls, she said. You build it on the things you survive together. Kaylin sat across from her. Then let me stop surviving alone. Later that day, Zaira walked through the West Wing again. This time, not in secret. She asked questions, met with the lead therapist, watched Cairo during a session. He didn't speak, but he laughed when she accidentally knocked over a stack of plastic cones. It was light, short, barely a giggle, but it melted something inside her. Kaylin watched from behind the glass. He didn't interfere. Zaira didn't turn, but she knew. He was hoping, silently, desperately, that she wouldn't walk away again. That evening, she joined him on the balcony again. This time, she brought 2 cups of tea. One for her, one for him. They sipped in silence for a while, the vineyard below glowing gold under the setting sun. Then she spoke. I was raised to believe that truth came before peace. Kaylin nodded slowly. I wasn't. I was taught that silence was safer. She glanced at him. I want to know everything, even the things you hate saying out loud. He met her gaze. Then I'll start now. He told her everything that night. No more half-truths, no more omitting. He talked about Oriel, how they met, how things started off light and fast, too fast, how they argued, fought, reconciled, and repeated the cycle, how she got pregnant and didn't tell him until after filing for child support. He said he didn't believe her at first, said he doubted the child was his, said things he now regrets. By the time the court ordered a paternity test, Cairo was already a toddler, and the results were undeniable. He admitted to hiring aggressive attorneys, to pushing for joint custody, to trying and failing to control a situation that spiraled into a PR nightmare waiting to happen. Then, Oriel disappeared. No forwarding address, no goodbye, and then, the accident. Kaylin's voice cracked only once during that part. When he said the words, I never got to say I was sorry. Zaira's throat tightened. I was going to tell you, Zaira. I liked who I was when I was with you, and I thought if I told you everything, that version of me would die. She looked out at the horizon. You forgot something, she said quietly. He turned. She met his eyes. I fell in love with the man you were before you became perfect. Kaylin blinked. Zaira looked down at her tea, then back up. So let's stop pretending that version needs to die. He had never told this story out loud. Not to his lawyers, not to his father, not even to himself in full. But that night, Kaylin Roth, billionaire, CEO, the man who made decisions in boardrooms with a single nod, sat on the edge of their bed, hands clasped, and told his wife about the part of his life that nearly destroyed him. Zaira didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. She just listened. It began 10 years ago. He wasn't a billionaire then. Not yet. But he was close. His second startup had been acquired by a major tech giant, and suddenly he had power. Not just capital, but attention. Meetings. Invites. Women. Oriel wasn't the kind of woman you forgot. She had wild curls, loud laughter, and a defiant streak that either drew you in or drove you away. Kaylin was drawn. Their chemistry was combustible from the start. Late nights, sharp arguments, public makeups. She didn't care who he was in the world. She only cared about how he treated her. And at first, that made him feel grounded. But love wasn't what kept them together. It was chaos. She was magnetic, Kaylin admitted. And I was arrogant. I thought I could fix us by throwing money at our problems. They broke up 5 times in 1 year. Each time, they ended up back in each other's beds. Until one morning, she told him she was pregnant. I didn't believe her, he said. Not because I thought she was lying, but because I didn't want to believe anything that tied me to her permanently. Zaira's lips pressed together. She didn't ask for anything at first, Kaylin continued. Then, 6 months in, I got served. Court papers, demanding support, demanding proof, demanding a name. He fought it, too publicly, too aggressively, and the press caught wind. That year nearly ended his company. Investors threatened to pull out. Clients distanced themselves. Sponsors cancelled events. But Oriel didn't care about the business. She just wanted me to say his name, Kaylin said quietly. To acknowledge him. He didn't. Until the test results arrived, sealed in a thick envelope, staring him in the face. Positive, 99.9%. The child, Cairo, was his. And still, he froze. He didn't know how to be a father. He barely knew how to be a partner. And Oriel wasn't interested in Keo parenting. She wanted full control, no contact. The lawyers made it worse. The fights got uglier. Threats were exchanged. Restraining orders. Emergency motions. And then, nothing. One day, she disappeared. Gone. He sent people to find her, but her trail ended in Denver. No records. No forward address. I thought it was over, Kaylin said. I told myself she just wanted to disappear and raise him without noise. So I let it be. 2 years later, a manila envelope arrived at his corporate office. Inside, a news clipping, a coroner's report, and a blurry photo of Cairo standing in line at a child welfare center in Sacramento. Oriel had died in a car crash. No known family, no will, and the boy had no guardian. Kaylin flew out that night. He didn't bring press, didn't call the lawyers. He walked into the center under a different name, wearing a hoodie, carrying no assistant. And when he saw Cairo sitting on the floor playing with a worn-out action figure, everything inside him cracked. He didn't even look up, Kaylin said, voice frayed now. Just kept his head down, like he was used to being invisible. Kaylin didn't know what he was doing, but he knew he couldn't leave him there. He pulled every string, used every favor, hired every specialist, and set up a private facility, a place where Cairo could have care, protection, education, therapy. But I couldn't bring him home, he admitted. Not then. Not to a life that was still full of noise and damage. And not to you. Zaira's voice was soft, steady. You were afraid I wouldn't see you the same way. He nodded. And if I told you after we got married, he whispered, it wouldn't be honesty. It would feel like betrayal. She let that sink in. Then asked the question that had been sitting on her heart since the first letter. Did you love her? He looked her in the eye. No. Zaira nodded once. She believed him. They sat in silence for a long time. The kind that didn't feel heavy, only necessary. I don't need you to be perfect, Kaylin, she said at last. I need you to be real. He exhaled through his nose. Slowly. I can do that. And I need to see him again, she added. He looked at her. I want to know him. Not through files, not through whispered updates. I want to know your son. Kaylin's eyes glassed. Zaira. She shook her head gently. This time, we're not hiding. He took her hand and kissed the back of it. Then he whispered, thank you for staying. She didn't say, you're welcome. She said, let's earn it. Have you ever learned something about someone you love that changed everything? Did you walk away or choose to understand them deeper? Tell us in the comments. Your story might help someone else find clarity too. And if you're still with us, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more true love stories from Mr. Charles Stories. Zaira returned to the West Wing the next morning. No hesitation this time. No silent creeping along the walls. She walked with purpose, and she didn't ask for permission. She was no longer a wife peeking through cracks. She was a woman choosing to stay. The door to the therapy room opened easily. Cairo was on the mat again, but this time he wasn't alone. A young speech specialist sat beside him, encouraging soft syllables with picture cards. Cairo didn't speak, but he made sounds, low hums, short bursts of breath. His eyes tracked the cards with quiet interest. Zaira stood near the wall and waited until the session ended. The therapist nodded toward her, and Cairo looked up. He remembered. Zaira knelt slowly. She pulled something from her bag. A small puzzle cube. Simple colors. Large tactile blocks. She placed it gently on the mat. Cairo blinked at it. Reached. Turned one side. Then another. Zaira smiled softly. That one's yours. He didn't speak, but he didn't look away, and that was enough. Over the next few days, Zaira returned again and again. Not with fanfare, not with demands, just with presence. A coloring book one day, a soft textured blanket the next. Kalin kept his distance, watching from corners, trying not to interfere. The staff began adjusting schedules to allow more natural time between Zaira and Cairo. There was no pressure for results, no milestone charts, just observation, connection, and slowly, something began to shift. One afternoon, Cairo walked toward Zaira without being prompted. He held up the cube. She smiled. He placed it in her hand. No words. Just trust. It was the first time he had initiated anything. The therapist wrote it down. Quietly, carefully, as if the moment could shatter if labeled too loudly. Zaira didn't cry, but her heart clenched. Because now, it wasn't just about helping Kalin fix something. This child wasn't a mistake she was learning to forgive. He was a boy she wanted to know. Later that night, Zaira stood in the doorway of the main bedroom. Kalin looked up from the edge of the bed. She didn't say anything at first. Then he came to me today, on his own. Kalin's face broke, just for a second. Zaira walked in slowly. I don't think I ever realized how much of your life you've lived behind closed doors. He swallowed. I got used to hiding, even when there was no danger. Especially then. Zaira nodded. I want to be part of the whole life, not the curated one. Kalin stood, slowly, carefully. You still want to stay? Zaira met his eyes. I don't stay because you ask me to. I stay because I saw the child everyone else forgot. He closed the gap between them. For a moment, they didn't speak. Then he whispered, You're stronger than me. No, she said. I just stopped pretending to be safe. They didn't sleep in the same bed that night. But for the first time in weeks, they didn't sleep in separate houses either. The next morning, Kalin walked into the West Wing without hesitation. The staff blinked. He rarely visited during active sessions. But this time, he knelt beside Cairo as the boy pushed colorful beads along a sensory track. Zaira was already there, guiding a puzzle. Kalin reached over and added one piece, sliding it gently into place. Cairo paused, looked at the puzzle, then at both of them. His small hand rested briefly on the edge of Kalin's wrist. Nothing more. But the moment held, long enough to freeze them all. Later that afternoon, Zaira walked the garden path behind the estate. The air was crisp, the vines bare now that the season had changed. She wasn't walking to think. She was walking to breathe, to feel the wind on her face, to remember who she was before all of this, and to decide who she would be now. Because this new life, the one with unspoken children and years of secrets, was not one she chose. But she wasn't running from it either. She was meeting it, one silent puzzle piece at a time. The next evening, Zaira stood at the kitchen counter chopping strawberries. Not because she needed to, not because anyone asked, but because she missed the feeling of normal, the scent of fruit, the quiet rhythm of slicing. the way her hands knew what to do without instruction. Across the house, she could hear Kaylin's voice, low, patient, reading aloud. To Cairo. Her eyes stung, but she didn't blink. When she finally walked in, they were seated on the floor of the reading lounge. Cairo curled on a large pillow, his legs tucked beneath him, gaze focused on the pages. Kaylin sat beside him, the book balanced between them. It was a story about stars, constellations, wishes. Kaylin stopped when he noticed her. "You don't have to stop," she said gently. "I like this one." He nodded, but didn't continue. Cairo looked between them, unsure. Zaira moved slowly, lowering herself onto the rug across from them. "Can I join you?" she asked softly. Cairo hesitated, then gave a small nod. Kaylin handed her the book. She read the next page. That night, Zaira sat by the window in their shared bedroom, her tea growing cold in her hands. Kaylin entered quietly, no expectation, just presence. "I've never seen him focus like that," he said. "He likes rhythm," she replied, "and softness. You give him that when you slow down." Kaylin walked over but didn't sit. He watched her, unsure where the boundary was now. "You were raised in stillness," he said quietly. "I was raised in truth," she corrected. "Even when it hurt." He looked down. "I was raised in silence." Zaira finally looked up at him. "Then let's raise him in something different." Kaylin blinked slowly. "I don't know how." Zaira placed her tea down and stood. "You learn. That's all love ever is." In the following days, she began shifting her work schedule. Fewer client meetings, more time in the West Wing. She didn't announce it. She just showed up. She learned Cairo's routines, which textures calmed him, which lights were too bright, how he traced patterns on his blanket when nervous, how he pressed his fingers to the glass before bed. She didn't try to be a mother, not yet. She tried to be consistent, predictable, safe, and little by little. He began to reach back. One morning, she found a drawing folded under her coffee cup. Crayon figures, simple, bright. 3 stick figures, 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. The tall one had glasses. The medium one had long hair. The smallest one held a square block. Her throat tightened. She didn't ask who drew it. She didn't need to. That night, she and Kaylin sat by the outdoor fireplace. The stars overhead were faint but visible. "Do you remember the first night I came home early?" she asked. He nodded. Slowly. "I thought you were going to leave for good." "I almost did." He looked at her. "But I kept seeing his eyes," she said. "And I thought, how many times has he been left without an explanation?" Kaylin's jaw tensed. "I didn't want him to feel that from me," she added. "Even if I didn't know him yet. You're a better person than I am." "No," she said. "I'm just not afraid of pain. Not anymore." They sat in silence. Then she whispered, "I love him, Kaylin." His eyes watered instantly. "I know," he said. "I'm not saying it to make you feel better," she added. "I'm saying it because I needed to say it out loud." He reached for her hand. She let him. Not because everything was perfect now, but because she wasn't afraid of what love demanded. Not anymore. The next day, Zaira began sketching a new room layout. One not for a guest, not for show, but for Cairo. Cloud-patterned wallpaper, soft rugs, shelving within his reach, weighted blankets, soft yellow lighting. A room that said, "You belong here." A room that said, "We're not going anywhere." The peace didn't last long. It never does when the world outside finds cracks to pry open. It started with a ping. One small notification on Zaira's phone at 7:48 a.m. A forwarded article from a former client. Subject line, "Hope this is nothing, but thought you should see." The headline read, "Tech Titan hiding secret heir. Former partner files anonymous tip." Her stomach dropped. She opened the article. It was short, more speculation than fact, but the damage was done. Words like illegitimate child, cover up, and quiet settlement danced across the screen. No names, no photos. but anyone close to them would know. She rushed down the stairs. Kalin was already in his study. His assistant stood outside, pale and nervous, holding a tablet. "Should I cancel the investor meeting?" the assistant asked. Kalin's jaw was tight. His eyes didn't leave the screen. "Give me 5, he said. The assistant left quickly. Zaira walked in. Kalin looked up. His expression didn't surprise her. It was the same one he wore when his mother died. Blank, guarded, wounded beneath the surface. "I didn't leak it," he said immediately. "I know," she replied. "But someone did." Kalin turned the screen so she could see the investor forum thread already bubbling. A handful of users speculating about his personal life. Others asking why his West Wing was under security clearance. "Do you think it's someone from your legal past?" she asked. "Possibly," he said. "Or an employee with access to the medical funding trail." Zaira sat down across from him. "Are we prepared?" "I've always had a contingency plan," he said, "but not one that included you and Cairo." She looked him in the eye. "Then, update the plan. We're not staying hidden." By noon, 3 financial outlets picked up the story. By evening, a tech gossip page published a grainy photo of Kalin walking into a pediatric center 2 years ago. It wasn't definitive, but it was close enough. The phone rang constantly. Board members, legal reps, his publicist, his attorney, and finally, his father. Kalin didn't answer that one. Zaira watched him as he moved through the chaos. He wasn't frantic. He was clinical, cold, like the Kalin from before. The man she once mistook for stoic before she knew it was armor. "Talk to me," she said. When he paused for breath, he didn't respond. She stepped closer. "I'm not leaving." Still no answer. She reached for his hand and pulled it away from the phone. "You don't have to handle this alone." Kalin's shoulders dropped slightly. "I don't know how to protect you from this," he said. "I've spent years keeping you out of the mess, but now it's going to get ugly." "Then let them try," Zaira said. "We don't owe the world anything except the truth." He looked at her, raw and tired. "We could make a joint statement," she added. "No drama, just clarity." His eyes widened a little. "You'd do that?" She nodded. "For Cairo. And for us." That night, Kalin drafted a letter. It was simple, clear, emotional without being exploitable. "I've made many choices in silence, some to protect, some out of fear. Years ago, I learned I had a son, a boy I didn't know existed, whose life was shaped by circumstances I can't change, but whom I love deeply. My wife and I have chosen to raise him with the privacy, safety, and support he deserves. This is not a scandal, it's a family reclaiming its peace." Zaira read it, then added one line at the end. "We ask for space, not because we are hiding, but because we are healing." Kalin looked at her for a long moment, then signed both their names. The next morning, the statement was released. No interviews, no press conference, just a message. And the internet did what it always does. Some defended, some speculated, some accused. But one thing was clear, the mystery was no longer theirs to hide. And strangely, that felt like freedom. The invitation came 3 days after the public statement. A charity dinner downtown, high profile, sponsored by one of Kalin's partner organizations. He was scheduled to speak, months in the making. Normally, Zaira wouldn't have gone. She hated cameras, crowds, shallow greetings wrapped in fake interest. But this time was different. This time, her silence would speak louder than words. The car pulled up to the entrance of the Grand Hyatt ballroom. Flashbulbs were already popping before the door opened. Kalin stepped out first, black suit, no tie, eyes forward. Then, Zaira. Her dress was simple, midnight blue. No jewelry except her wedding ring. But her posture, her presence, said everything the headlines didn't. She took Kalin's hand in front of the cameras, not as a show, but as a promise. Inside, the noise was a hum of low laughter, crystal clinks, and cautious glances. Everyone was watching, not openly, but enough that she felt it in the air. Tight, thick, judgmental. A few smiles were genuine, many were rehearsed. One woman approached early, her tone too cheerful. "I just want to say, you're so brave for coming tonight." Zaira gave her a calm nod. "I'm not brave," she said. "I'm just present." The woman blinked, then walked away. Kaylin squeezed her hand under the table. "You don't have to prove anything," he whispered. "I'm not here to prove," she replied. "I'm here to remind them I'm not afraid." During the dinner, a host read off a list of donors. Kaylin's name drew polite applause. Zaira's presence drew quiet tension. But no one dared ask about the boy, because some silences are stronger than gossip. When it was time for Kaylin to speak, he stood at the podium with nothing in his hands. No speech, no notes, just his voice. "I've been called many things in my life: entrepreneur, innovator, risk-taker. But the most important title I carry doesn't make headlines. It's father." A few heads turned. He continued, "And it's not a role I earned easily or perfectly, but I'm learning every day that love doesn't require perfection, only presence." Zaira felt her chest tighten. He looked toward her once, briefly, then back at the crowd. "I'm grateful to stand beside a woman who reminds me daily that healing isn't loud, it's steady, and it begins with telling the truth." The room fell silent. He left the stage to a standing ovation, not from everyone, but from enough people that Zaira knew something had changed. Back in the car, Kaylin exhaled like he'd been holding his breath all night. "I've never felt that exposed." "You didn't look exposed," she said. "You looked honest." He turned to her. "You're the reason I can even say those words." Zaira leaned her head back against the seat. "Then keep saying them, even when it's uncomfortable." He reached for her hand again. She didn't pull away. Outside the window, cameras still flashed. But inside the car, there was no pretense left. Just two people who had chosen to stay, while the whole world watched to see if they'd fall apart. The house was quieter now, not in that cold, distant way it used to be, but in the way that feels like something is settling in place. Like truth. Like home. Zaira stood in the west wing with a soft tote bag resting at her side. Inside were a few things: a storybook, a plush star pillow, a new set of pajamas. Not expensive ones, just soft ones, chosen with care. She'd already told Kaylin, "I don't want this to be staged. No announcements, no photographers, just a normal day." He had agreed. No resistance. That was new. Cairo was in the therapy room, lining up square blocks by size. Zaira walked in slowly. No fanfare. She didn't rush. He looked up, then down, then up again. She waited. He pushed a green block toward her. Her smile grew. "Thank you," she said softly. "I brought something too." She sat on the floor and unzipped the tote, pulled out the pillow, set it down gently. Then, the book. Cairo reached for the book and tapped the cover. A question. "You want me to read it?" she asked. He tapped again. She opened it. He leaned closer. Not a word passed between them, but none were needed. By the end of the hour, Cairo was curled on the pillow beside her, head resting against her arm. The therapist pretended not to stare from the doorway. Zaira didn't move, not even to breathe deeply, because trust like that is sacred and fragile. And after everything he'd been through, she refused to be the next person to walk away. Later that afternoon, she walked with Kaylin through the main hallway. "I want to move him into the main house." Kaylin hesitated. "Already? He's not a project, Kaylin. He's a child. Your son. And this house is too quiet without him." Kaylin rubbed the back of his neck. "He needs structure. Then let's build it around him." He looked at her. "Are you ready for that?" She didn't blink. "I already chose him. The rest is just logistics." The next 2 days were a gentle blur of transitions. Furniture moved. A small wing near their bedroom was reconfigured. Zaira chose everything herself. Muted blues, star-shaped lighting, a rocker in the corner, weighted toys, soft textures. She worked with his therapist to create a schedule for meals, learning, rest. Not controlling, just calming. And every night she sat beside his bed while he held the plush star pillow, tracing the fabric seams with his small fingers until he fell asleep. She didn't cry, but some nights she wanted to, because she knew he'd been alone for far too long. Kalin kept his distance during the transitions, not from Cairo, but from the intimacy of it. He checked schedules, coordinated doctors, managed the logistics. But Zaira could see it. He was afraid of being a father fully, not just behind glass. One night, after Cairo had fallen asleep, she found Kalin in the kitchen, staring at a cup of untouched coffee. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. Zaira stepped closer. "No one does. But you're here. That's what matters." He looked down. "I thought giving him the best care meant building a wall around him." She reached for his hand. "You didn't build a wall, you built a bridge. You just forgot to walk across it." Kalin's eyes met hers. "I'm scared of doing it wrong." She smiled gently. "Then do it with me." And he nodded. Not because he was ready, but because she was, and that was enough. Cairo's room smelled like lavender and soft cotton. The walls were painted a cool blue with pale constellations brushed in glow-in-the-dark ink. Zaira had done them by hand, each star placed slowly, one by one, while Kalin sat on the floor behind her, silently watching her work. It wasn't a nursery. It wasn't a medical unit. It was a sky room, a place where Cairo could wake up and see something other than ceilings that reminded him of white walls and wires. And for the first time, it felt like this home was his too. Every night had its rhythm now. Dinner at 6. A short walk in the garden afterward if the weather allowed. Bath by 7:30. Story by 8. Zaira always read the same 3 books in rotation. She let Cairo choose with his hands. He didn't speak yet, not in full words, but his gestures were clear, intentional. Sometimes he sat beside her. Sometimes he curled up in her lap. Sometimes he simply listened from the corner of the bed, his eyes half closed, fingers wrapped around the edge of the plush star. Every night, when she closed the book, she whispered the same sentence: "You are safe. You are loved. And we're not going anywhere." One night, Kalin knocked softly before stepping into the room. Zaira looked up. She was sitting cross-legged beside Cairo, who was tracing his finger along the moon-shaped border of his pillow. "Can I join you?" Kalin asked. Zaira nodded. He sat down, stiff at first, uncertain, but Cairo glanced at him, then looked back to his book. That was permission enough. Zaira handed the book to Kalin. He cleared his throat. It took him 2 tries to find his voice. It cracked once on the second page, but he didn't stop. By page 5, Cairo was leaning into his side. Zaira didn't speak. She just closed her eyes and breathed. This was what love looked like when no one was trying to perform. In the days that followed, Kalin started rearranging his work schedule. He declined 2 board meetings, rescheduled a public appearance. The house noticed. So did the staff, but no one said a word. They simply moved quietly around him as if something delicate and real was forming, and no one wanted to interrupt. Cairo began showing new behaviors, small things. He would look directly into Zaira's eyes for longer periods. He began mimicking sounds from storybooks, soft, breathy tones that were almost syllables. He smiled more, touched textures, pointed, handed objects without prompting. One morning, he pulled Zaira's sleeve, pointed at the kitchen, and made a low humming sound. She followed. He pointed at the toaster. She smiled. "You want waffles?" He clapped once. She laughed. "That's a yes." Later, Kalin entered the kitchen to find them sitting on the floor. Cairo with syrup on his nose, Zaira laughing into her sleeve. For a moment, he just watched. He wasn't a CEO here. He wasn't the man who lost court battles or signed silence agreements. He was a father, a husband, and somehow, still worthy of both. That night, as they tucked Cairo into bed together, he reached out with both hands, one for each of them. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His small fingers touched theirs. A triangle, a unit. Zaira kissed his forehead. "You're safe, you're loved, and we're right here." Kaylin echoed her words, quiet, broken, whole. Cairo closed his eyes, and for the first time since he entered this house, he slept without restlessness. In the hallway, Zaira leaned into Kaylin's chest. "He's starting to trust," she whispered. Kaylin wrapped his arms around her. "Because he has someone who never blinked." Zaira smiled into his shirt. "No," she said softly. "Because he has someone who finally stopped hiding." It had been 2 weeks since the media storm started. Most stories burned fast. This one lingered. Whispers still circled investor calls. Anonymous sources kept feeding blogs. Words like illegitimate, hidden child, and cover-up refused to fade. But something else had started to change too. People weren't angry. They were curious. Some were quietly supportive. A few journalists reached out with compassion. Parents of neurodivergent children sent anonymous messages. "You're not alone. Thank you for protecting him." And Kaylin was beginning to see the cost of silence. Not just on his brand, on his son, on himself. So one morning, without waiting for anyone's approval, Kaylin walked into the media room of his company's headquarters, took a deep breath, and said, "It's time." Zaira sat across from him in their sunroom that afternoon. He looked tired, calm, focused. "I want to speak," he said. "Not through a press release, not through lawyers, just me." Zaira looked up from the blanket she was folding. "Then speak," she said, "but speak like a father, not a CEO." He nodded. "No rehearsed lines, just the truth." She placed the blanket down. "I'll be there." The next day, they stood behind a modest podium at the tech firm's community center, not the glitzy media hall. No press pool, just one camera, one statement. Kaylin wore no tie. Zaira wore no makeup. Intentional, unpolished, real. He stepped up first. "My name is Kaylin Roth. Many of you know me for the companies I've built, the technology I've invested in, the clean image I've maintained. But today, I'm not here as an executive. I'm here as a father, as a man who made mistakes and spent years hiding behind walls of silence, thinking that was strength." He paused, looked directly at the camera. "I have a son. His name is Cairo. He is bright, gentle, and curious. He is also neurodivergent. For the first years of his life, he did not have the stability or protection he deserved, not because of a lack of care, but because of a lack of courage." "Mine." Zaira stood just behind him, not stiff, but grounded. "I tried to shield the people I love by keeping him a secret," Kaylin said. "But the truth is, hiding what matters most never protects anyone. It only isolates them. And in that isolation, I hurt the people closest to me." He turned slightly, met Zaira's eyes, and somehow they stayed. He turned back to the camera. "I'm not here to repair my image. I'm here to stop pretending I was ever flawless to begin with. What matters now is my family, my wife, my son, and the kind of man I still have time to be." No questions were allowed, no edits. The video went live, uncut. Within hours, the reaction poured in. Not hate, not outrage, but empathy, real empathy. Parents flooded the comments with messages of solidarity. Social workers reposted the speech. Advocacy groups quoted him. And somewhere between all the noise, something rare happened in the digital world. People believed him. Because he didn't flinch, and neither did she. That night, as they sat on the patio in silence, Kaylin whispered, "I don't know what tomorrow will bring." Zaira didn't look up from her tea. "Neither does anyone else," she said. "But not everyone has the courage to start again." He turned to her. "I wouldn't be doing this without you." She met his eyes. "Yes, you would." He frowned. She smiled softly. "Because he was worth it." Long before I ever showed up, Kaylin went quiet, then nodded slowly. And this time, there was no need for more words. The world kept spinning after the video went live, but inside the Roth estate, everything slowed down. Not in retreat, in recalibration. Zaira stepped into Cairo's room just after sunrise. The house was still. The curtains were drawn. A sliver of soft gold light cut across the floor. She found him sitting at the window seat, blanket around his shoulders, fingers tracing lines on the glass. "Cairo," she whispered. He didn't turn, but he tapped twice against the window pane, his way of saying, "I hear you." She walked over and sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "I brought your book," she said, holding up the one with the blue whale on the cover. He reached for it, then paused. His lips moved. Slow, careful. "Bo, okay." Zaira froze. He said it again. "Book," a full word. No prompt, no echoing. Just his voice, a soft sound, almost swallowed by air, but real. Tears rushed to her eyes before she could stop them. She blinked quickly, not wanting to make the moment about her. "You want me to read it?" He nodded. She opened the book, heart pounding. Behind her, Kaylin stood in the doorway, barefoot, silent. He'd heard it too. His hand covered his mouth. Zaira kept reading. One page, then another. Cairo leaned into her side. A few minutes later, he looked up at Kaylin, then patted the pillow beside them. Invitation. Kaylin crossed the room slowly, like he was approaching something sacred. He sat. Cairo pressed the book into his hands. Kaylin's voice shook as he read. It didn't matter. Cairo listened. That afternoon, Zaira sat by the fireplace with her laptop open. She had 3 speaking invitations in her inbox. 2 were from design conferences. One was from a child advocacy group, asking her to speak about raising neurodivergent children in private households. She stared at that third one the longest. She wasn't a parent. Not by blood. Not yet. But she felt something pull in her chest. A sense of responsibility. A voice. She didn't answer the email yet, but she saved it. Later that night, she and Kaylin took a walk in the garden. The sky was soft and low. The vines had grown quiet for the season. "Do you think people will forget?" he asked. "Some will," she said, "but the right ones won't." He nodded slowly. "I don't care about the reputation anymore. I care about peace." "You're finally living like that's true," she replied. He looked at her, his voice quiet. "I'm still learning how to be this man, with a family, with all of it." Zaira stopped walking. "Then I'll meet you where you are, every time." Kaylin stepped closer. His eyes searched hers. "You still love me?" She nodded, but differently now. "Not because you made me feel safe, but because you chose to stop hiding, even when it cost you everything." He pulled her into him. They didn't kiss. They just breathed. And in that silence, they were closer than they'd ever been. Later that week, Zaira found Cairo drawing on the rug, stick figures again. He handed her the paper. This time, he labeled them in shaky, crooked letters. Dad, me, Z. She didn't cry. She framed it and hung it just outside his door. A reminder that healing wasn't a moment. It was a daily choice. Have you ever seen someone transform, not by force, but by finally telling the truth? Do you believe love can grow stronger after trust is broken, if both people choose to stay? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this chapter moved you, give this video a like, tap that subscribe button, and stay with us for the next chapter, because this family's story is far from over. The sun was warm again. Spring had begun to lean into the hills, and the vineyard lines outside the estate shimmered green with new life. Inside, life was shifting too. But this time, not from tension, from rhythm, from something beginning to feel like family. Zaira stood in front of the full-length mirror, brushing her curls away from her face. She wasn't dressed for a photo shoot or an event. She was dressed for the kind of Saturday that used to mean nothing. Open house. At the early learning center, Kaylin's foundation had built years ago. Except today, it was different. Today, Cairo would come with them. Not hidden. Not through the back. With them. It had taken months of gentle steps, but his therapist agreed. He was ready for short, supported public moments. Kaylin had been hesitant. Zaira wasn't. He doesn't need to be protected from the world, she'd told him. He needs to be guided through it. Kaylin had nodded slowly. That's what led to this moment. Cairo stood at the front door in soft grey pants, holding a sensory fidget toy, his weighted vest gently hugging his frame. His eyes moved across the tiled floor. He wasn't anxious, just watchful. Zaira crouched to his level. "You ready, baby?" He tapped the toy, then looked at the door. She smiled. That was enough. The learning center buzzed with quiet activity, parents with toddlers, educators discussing grants, soft jazz playing in the background. Kaylin walked a few steps ahead, speaking briefly with the director. Zaira walked at Cairo's side, hand loose by her leg, never reaching unless he invited it. A little girl holding a juice box waved at Cairo. He blinked, then raised his fingers and waved back. Zaira's heart squeezed. She didn't say anything, didn't interrupt the moment, just kept walking. Later, Kaylin stood on the small platform at the center of the room, thanking attendees for supporting inclusive education. Cairo sat on Zaira's lap, gently swaying. Then, without prompting, he slid off her lap and walked to Kaylin, straight to him. Kaylin froze. Cairo reached up, not with words, but with both arms. A request. Kaylin dropped the mic without a word and lifted him. The crowd didn't clap, didn't gasp. They just watched, silent, honoring the moment. One photographer took a photo. That image, Kaylin Roth holding his son. No speech, no suit jacket, just arms wrapped around something real, would appear in 5 major magazines within the week. But no one in that room would ever forget what they saw before it was edited for print. A father finally stepping into the role he'd once run from. Later that night, back home, Zaira stood at the kitchen counter, slicing fruit. Cairo sat on the floor, drawing. Kaylin leaned against the wall, still in his dress shirt, watching both of them. "I didn't think I'd survive today," he said. "You didn't just survive," Zaira replied. "You showed up." Kaylin shook his head. "He chose me, in front of everyone." She looked up. "No," she said softly. "He chose to trust. That's different. And far more powerful." Kaylin exhaled. "You know what I saw when I held him?" Zaira raised a brow. "I didn't see the headlines, or the court files. I saw a boy who didn't know the world had ever questioned him." Zaira smiled. "That's because we stopped questioning ourselves." That night, Zaira tucked Cairo in, while Kaylin read aloud from the star book. They didn't need music, or lights, just words, soft voices, safety. And as Cairo drifted off to sleep, Kaylin kissed the top of his head and whispered, "I'm not perfect, but I'm yours." The plaque was small, simple brushed brass. It sat centered on the doorway of the remodeled room across from Zaira and Kaylin's suite, etched in soft serif font, Cairo's room. That was it. No embellishment, no title, not playroom, not therapy suite. Just his name, his place. Zaira had it installed while Kaylin was out finalizing a real estate deal. He didn't know until he came home. When he saw it, he didn't speak. He just stood there, frozen in the hallway. Zaira came up beside him, holding a warm cloth from the laundry basket. "He belongs here," she said. "And now he knows it." Kaylin turned slowly, emotion clinging to his face like a shadow he couldn't shake. "Thank you." She shook her head. "Don't thank me. I did this for him. But I meant it for us." Inside the room, Cairo was lining up soft animal figures on the windowsill, murmuring little breathy syllables as he went. When Kaylin stepped inside, Cairo looked up, then pointed at the plaque on the door. Zaira smiled. He saw it earlier. He touched every letter. Kaylin crouched beside him. "You like your name on the door?" Cairo nodded, then pressed one hand flat against Kaylin's chest, right over his heart. Kaylin nearly lost his breath. That was how Cairo said, "You too." The next morning, Zaira made a phone call to her old university mentor. It was quick, purposeful. By lunch, her email had a draft outline for a guest lecture series on designing safe spaces for neurodiverse children. She forwarded it to Kaylin with a short note, thinking of starting something. "For real, He replied minutes later, "It's about time. You've always been the one who sees what others ignore." She smiled at the screen, then turned toward the hallway where Cairo's laughter echoed faintly. This wasn't the life she imagined years ago in grad school. It was better, harder, yes, but richer in the ways that truly mattered. That night, the three of them sat on the patio wrapped in soft blankets, the wind teasing the last petals from the nearby garden trees. Cairo sat between them, chewing softly on his tether bracelet, eyes flicking up to the stars. Zaira pointed. "That one's called Orion." Cairo followed her finger. Kaylin added, "And over there, Cassiopeia." Zaira looked at him, surprised. "I had a telescope as a kid," he said, smiling slightly. "My mother told me stories about stars instead of fairy tales." "She sounds like someone I would have liked," Zaira replied. He turned his head toward her. "You remind me of her, not because of what you do, but how you hold space." She always knew when to speak, and when just being there was louder. Zaira's lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she reached across Cairo's lap and took his hand. Cairo didn't resist. He was used to that now. Connection wasn't noise anymore. It was safety. Later that night, Zaira and Kaylin stood in the doorway, watching Cairo sleep. Kaylin whispered, "What if we gave him more?" Zaira looked up at him. "More what?" "More family." She studied him carefully. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I don't know," he said. "I'm just saying, we're stronger now, and he's growing, and maybe this family isn't finished." She exhaled, slow and deep. "We've only just begun healing." "I know." She leaned against his chest. "But maybe healing leaves room for hope." He nodded against her hair. "Yeah, maybe it does." In the morning, Cairo found a new drawing taped to his wall. 3 figures, stars above their heads, and a fourth one, tiny, floating nearby. No label, just potential, just love preparing for expansion. Zaira didn't bring it up again. She didn't need to. Once Kaylin said it, that quiet, tentative, "maybe we're not finished," the thought lingered between them like a candle flame that refused to go out. Everywhere they went, it followed. In the kitchen, while packing Cairo's snack bag. In the garden, when Kaylin handed her a cup of tea and she caught him staring at her stomach without realizing it. Even at night, when they lay in bed, backs touching but silent, both wide awake. It wasn't pressure, it was potential. And one morning, Zaira finally spoke. "Do you want another child?" Kaylin looked up from his coffee. His answer was immediate. "Yes." Zaira's breath caught. "Why now?" He thought about it, then said, "Because for the first time in my life, I'm not trying to fix anything, I'm just ready to build." They didn't call it trying. They didn't make it a plan. They just stopped guarding the possibility, stopped holding their breath. And somewhere in the quiet moments, folding laundry, walking Cairo through a new garden path, brushing against each other in doorways, their intimacy softened. Not urgent, not broken, just real, like it used to be, before secrets and silences. One night, while folding Cairo's pajamas, Kaylin said, "What if it doesn't happen?" Zaira looked at him. "Then it doesn't." "But we'll still be okay." He nodded. "I know. It's strange. For so long I didn't think I deserved this life, and now I can't stop wanting more of it." Zaira walked over and kissed him softly on the forehead. "That's not greed," she whispered. "That's growth." Weeks passed. Cairo started stringing 2 words together. Want book, go garden. Z hug. Every time, Kaylin's eyes misted. Zaira started journaling again. Not for business, for herself. She wrote about becoming, about rebuilding, about mothering a child who taught her how to slow down and love on a cellular level, and about what it meant to love a man who finally knew how to stay. One morning, she stood barefoot in the bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test in her hand. 2 lines, clear, definitive. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She sat on the edge of the bathtub and laughed softly into her hands, because somehow her body had made room, just like her heart did. She didn't tell Kaylin right away, not because she was unsure, but because she wanted to savor it, one day more, where it was hers, quietly, fully. Then she placed the test in a small box, wrapped it in navy paper, slid it beside his coffee mug with a note. I came home one day too early and found everything I didn't expect. Now it's your turn. Kaylin didn't open it until after she left the kitchen. She heard the sound of the mug hitting the counter. Then, footsteps. Fast ones. He found her in Cairo's room, watching him build a train track. Kaylin didn't speak. He just knelt beside her, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." She smiled. "I was just making room." He placed his hand over her stomach, tentative and reverent. "We'll make room for all of them. However they come." Outside, the sun rose a little higher. And inside, a family that once began with a lie, continued with a choice, one made together, every single day. Zaira knew they couldn't break the news to Cairo the way most parents would. There would be no Big Brother t-shirts, no balloons or squeals, no sudden surprises. Cairo didn't respond well to change, not when it came fast or loud. So instead, they prepared him the way they had prepared everything else in his world. With softness, with signals, with love that whispered before it spoke. The nursery door stayed closed for weeks. Cairo walked past it every day, not curious, just accepting. He trusted the patterns around him. But then the changes started. Zaira brought home a new blanket. He touched the fabric, smiled. "Small?" he asked, looking up. Zaira crouched. "Yes." "For someone small." Cairo nodded once, filed that information away. Later, Kaylin joined him in the reading room and pulled out a book Zaira had custom made. It looked like one of Cairo's favorites, but the pages were different. Page 1. "This is our family." Illustrations of 3 smiling stick figures. Dad, Mom, Cairo. Page 2. One day, something new began to grow. A heart. Then, a tiny star. Page 3. The star will become someone special. A small figure forming. Page 4. That someone will be your sibling. A baby, drawn small and soft, reaching out a hand. Page 5. You are loved. You are important. You are always our Cairo. Cairo stared at the images for a long time, then turned to Kaylin. "Mine?" he asked, pressing a finger to the star. Kaylin nodded, his voice tight. "Yes. Yours too." Cairo looked at the page again, then placed his hand flat on the image of the baby. That night, Zaira found him sitting outside the nursery door. He had one of his sensory blankets in his lap. He wasn't rocking, just waiting. "Want see?" he said. Zaira smiled. "Okay." She opened the door slowly. The room was still mostly empty, but the paint was fresh, soft sand and white. Shelves sat waiting. A crib stood assembled in the corner. Cairo stepped inside. He didn't touch anything, just looked, then looked up at her, and smiled. Zaira knelt beside him. "It's for them, but it'll always be for you too." He rested his head on her shoulder. The next day, Zaira brought Cairo into her OB appointment. Kaylin stood on the other side, hands in his pockets, trying to look calm. The doctor turned the monitor so Cairo could see it clearly. The baby's heartbeat echoed through the room. Ba-thump, ba-thump, ba-thump. Cairo's eyes widened. He didn't speak, but he turned to Zaira, placed his hand gently on her stomach, then smiled. At home, Zaira placed the sonogram on the fridge beside one of Cairo's drawings. She didn't frame it, didn't separate it. They belonged together. Over the following weeks, Cairo became the baby's protector before the baby was even born. He checked the nursery each morning, sometimes rearranging plush toys. He asked questions now. "Small eat? Sleep here? Z share?" He was preparing, becoming, and Kaylin, he stopped fearing it. He stepped fully into fatherhood. And now, he was building it from the beginning. One night, Zaira couldn't sleep. She walked to Cairo's room, found him awake too, sitting on the windowsill. He looked at her, sleepy-eyed, and whispered, "Love, baby." Zaira felt her throat close. She walked over, sat beside him, and whispered back, "Love you first." He reached for her hand, and in the quiet of that moment, nothing was broken anymore. Not the child, not the man, not the woman who came home one day too early and found her entire life waiting to be rewritten. There was a time Kaylin hated attention. Not the curated kind, the headlines he could control, but the messy kind, the kind that asked questions, the kind that poked at wounds, the kind that reminded him of how human he really was. But now, attention meant something else. Now, it meant showing the world what healing looked like. Flawed, slow, but real. It started with an invitation from a national family advocacy organization. They were hosting a summit on inclusive parenting, featuring public figures, doctors, and parents raising neurodivergent children. They asked Zaira to speak. She didn't say yes immediately. She brought it to Kaylin. "It's not about exposure," she told him. "It's about truth." Again. Kaylin didn't hesitate this time. "I'll be there. Right next to you." The summit was held in Chicago. The ballroom buzzed with media teams and non-profit leaders. Zaira wore a soft cream blouse and flats. Not for style, comfort. Kaylin kept his blazer off. No cufflinks, no polish. Cairo didn't come. He stayed home with his therapist and a new sensory puppy Zaira had introduced into their daily life. But this wasn't about a show of perfection. This was about presence. When Zaira took the stage, the room quieted. She didn't speak with flair. She spoke with certainty. "I'm not here to offer a formula," she began. "I'm here to talk about what happened after I came home one day too, early, and discovered a secret that should have broken everything." The audience leaned in. But it didn't break us. Because love, when it's honest, doesn't disappear when it's tested. It deepens, it sharpens, it teaches. She spoke about Cairo, not with pity, with pride, about his growth, his words, his trust, and about the man who once hid from fatherhood and now read bedtime stories with voices and character accents and left sticky notes on lunchboxes that said, "You're strong." She said, "We didn't fix our family. We built it." The applause rose slow, but strong, because it was real. And when Kaylin joined her on stage, holding her hand over her still-growing stomach, it wasn't a redemption story. It was a choice, made again and again, publicly and privately, to show up, to be all in. After the talk, a mother approached Zaira in the hallway. She looked tired, worn in a way only real motherhood wears a person down. "I needed to hear that," she said. "I've been ashamed for years, thinking I was the only one walking around pretending to be okay." Zaira nodded. "You're not." The woman's eyes welled up. "Do you think people like us ever stop hiding?" Zaira didn't hesitate. "We stop the moment we decide being seen is more important than being safe." Back at the hotel, Kaylin closed the door behind them and leaned against it. "That was something," he said. Zaira dropped her bag on the chair. "You looked calm." "I wasn't." She walked over and placed his hand on her stomach. "You're doing this." He looked down at her belly, then back up at her. "So are you." They stood like that for a while, palms pressed against hope. No headlines, no cameras, just presence. The flight home was quiet. Zaira slept with her head against Kaylin's shoulder. His hand rested over her stomach. Their fingers were laced like something practiced, natural, no longer new. They landed just after midnight. The house was dark when they pulled in, but inside, a soft light glowed from under Cairo's door. Kaylin opened it gently. Cairo was awake, sitting cross-legged on his bed, holding his star pillow. He looked up, then smiled. "You home," he said. Zaira's chest tightened. She knelt beside the bed and brushed her fingers through his curls. "Yes, baby. We're home." Cairo looked at Kaylin, and whispered, "Daddy too?" Kaylin's throat tightened. "Yeah. Daddy too." Then Cairo reached for him. No hesitation. Kaylin crossed the room and sat beside him, wrapping him in a long, slow hug. The kind he used to be scared to give, the kind that made it hard to let go. The next morning, Zaira opened the front door to find a package on the step. No note, just a small, square box. Inside, a framed photograph. Glossy. It was the photo from the summit, Zaira and Kaylin on stage, hand in hand, her pregnancy just beginning to show. On the back, scribbled in messy handwriting, "Families like yours give the rest of us hope." Zaira held it to her chest for a long time. Later that day, they set up a quiet celebration for Cairo. Nothing loud, just a picnic blanket in the garden. His therapist came. So did one of the volunteers from the center who had worked with him early on. There was soft music, fruit slices, and one cupcake with a blue star candle, not for his birthday, but to celebrate his name day, the day they put his name on the door, the day he was no longer hidden. Zaira handed him a small box wrapped in yellow paper. He opened it slowly. Inside was a locket. One side had a photo of Zaira and Kaylin. The other was empty. He looked up, confused. Zaira tapped the blank side. "That's for you to choose who belongs there." He stared at the locket for a long time, then reached into his drawing bin and pulled out a folded paper. He handed it to Kaylin. Inside, a drawing of all three of them holding hands, and in the top corner, a new figure, small, round, with a heart drawn inside it. Kaylin looked at him. Cairo said quietly, "Baby." Kaylin's eyes burned. Zaira blinked fast. Cairo tapped the heart again. Ours. That night, Kaylin stood at the bedroom window long after Zaira had fallen asleep. The house was still. The vineyard outside shimmered under a pale moon. He thought about everything that had brought them here. One day too early, one lie too far, one son too hidden, but also one chance to make it right. And he had, not with money, not with power, with presence, with truth, with love that stayed when it had every reason to leave. Kaylin whispered into the dark, "Thank you for coming home early." And across the hall, Cairo slept soundly in the room with his name on it. It happened in the quiet. No rush, no drama, just a tightening breath, then another, then one more that Zaira couldn't talk through. She was standing in Cairo's room when it started, watching him organize his books by color, something he did every Saturday morning like clockwork. She placed a hand over her belly, felt the shift. Cairo looked up. "Z?" She smiled, soft and calm. "I think baby's ready." Kaylin was in the kitchen chopping apples when he got the call, Zaira's voice light, not panicked. "It's time." He dropped the knife, didn't even realize it until the blade clanged against the marble. By the time he reached the car, Cairo was already buckled into his booster seat, holding his favorite soft blanket. Kaylin looked at Zaira. "You okay?" She nodded. "Ready?" He kissed her forehead. "Then let's go meet the rest of our family." At the hospital, everything moved smoothly. No complications, no noise. Just hours of slow progress, deep breathing, and moments where Kaylin's hands didn't leave hers. At one point, she squeezed his fingers harder than she ever had, and he didn't flinch. "You've done harder things," he whispered. She gave him a look. He grinned. "You stayed with me." She laughed, even through the contraction. Just after 3 a.m., their daughter arrived. No cries at first, just a soft inhale, a blink, and then the sound that made Zaira's whole body loosen with relief. Tiny, alive, whole. Kaylin stood frozen. She was placed in Zaira's arms first, then into his. He looked at her like she was made of something sacred. "She's so small," he said. Zaira smiled. "She's everything." Back home, the nursery was ready. Cairo helped unpack the baby bag and placed each item in its new home. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. He sat on the floor near the rocker while Zaira nursed, tapping a rhythm on his knees and humming to himself. Kaylin watched from the doorway. They weren't the family people expected him to have, but they were the family he never dared to dream of. The baby was named Isla, meaning light around the moon. Zaira chose it. Kaylin agreed before she even finished explaining why. Because that's what Isla was, soft, gentle light that followed a long, quiet darkness. One night, Cairo climbed onto the couch beside Zaira. Isla was asleep in her bassinet nearby. Cairo rested his head on Zaira's shoulder and whispered, "Stay forever." Zaira kissed the top of his head. "We're already forever, baby." Kaylin looked at them from across the room and felt peace in a way he never had before, because for the first time in his life, there was nothing left to hide, nothing left to prove, only love. Quiet, steady, real. The house felt different now, not because of the new baby, not because of the attention or the past headlines, but because every room finally held the truth. No more closed doors, no more secrets sealed behind custom locks, no more pretending, just life, lived out loud, together. Zaira sat on the back porch one afternoon, Isla asleep on her chest, Cairo curled up beside her with a picture book in hand. The breeze was light, the vineyards swayed, the sky was a soft silver blue. Kaylin stepped outside, coffee mug in hand. He didn't speak right away, just took them in, his whole world breathing in rhythm right in front of him. He sat down beside them and placed a gentle hand over Ayla's tiny back. "She looks like you," he said softly. Zaira smirked. "You mean she has hair?" He laughed, a real one, the kind he rarely gave the world. Cairo flipped a page, traced the drawing of a tree with his finger, then leaned against Kaylin's side. No words, just presence. Later that evening, after the kids were asleep, Kaylin walked into the study and found Zaira holding a folder. Inside were the letters he had written her during the days after she discovered the secret. Every single one, neatly saved, tucked in order. "You kept them," he said quietly. Zaira looked up. "They weren't apologies," she said. "They were promises. And you kept them." He swallowed. "Most people wouldn't have." "I'm not most people," she replied. "And you weren't the same man who wrote them. You were trying." He sat across from her. "I don't know how I got here. You came home." He tilted his head. "You came home first." Zaira held his gaze. "Yeah. One day too early." They both smiled, a little broken, a little healed, but whole in all the ways that mattered. Kaylin stood and crossed to her. He knelt, slowly, intentionally. "I don't need a ceremony," he said. "But I need you to know, if I had to do it all again, even the mess, I'd still choose you." Zaira placed her hand on his cheek. "Then promise me one thing, anything." She leaned in. "Don't disappear when it gets quiet. Stay when it gets boring. Stay when it gets ordinary. Stay when there's nothing left to fix." He pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm already here." The story didn't end with a wedding. It didn't end with wealth or headlines or dramatic reconciliations. It ended in the same way it began, a door opened too early, a moment interrupted, a truth revealed. But this time, the interruption was a beginning. Isla stirred in her crib across the hall. Cairo's nightlight glowed faintly against his space wallpaper, and Zaira sat on the edge of the bed beside Kaylin, whispering something no one else would hear. "We're not perfect," Kaylin replied. "We're real." And that was more than enough. Sometimes the day that breaks your heart is the same day that begins your real life. Zaira came home too early and uncovered everything she wasn't supposed to see. But what she found wasn't the end. It was the truth. And when two people choose to grow through honesty instead of hiding behind perfection, love becomes something that can't be shaken. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. Would you have stayed like Zaira did? Or walked away? Tap that like button to help more people find stories like this. Hit subscribe to join our family here on Mr. Charles Stories. And if you believe that love deserves second chances, drop A in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one. Mr. Charles Stories, where every love story comes with a lesson.